here we are, and Megan Gleason, who we worked hard to get to know. This is actually not at the well site, a different site that I took Megan to with her photographer John Austria, uh, and got that journal headline there. For this big gas producer pays millions to the state for violations. How did that happen? How how did I wind up getting recognition for it? So there's a pick two, Tom, if you see that.
Don, why don't you just tell us a little bit more? I'm sure you were planning to do this at some point about this company called Hilcorp. This
Yeah,
this it's a little
we're
mom and pop, right? That does stripper wells. Is that right?
yeah, Jim. Let's see if we can get through our presentation here.
Yeah,
We'll
here it
get to
is.
we'll get
It's
to it.
you seeing this one
Right.
now?
Thanks a lot. So here we go. Here, I think this is for all of you that are on the right side of things. That's why you're here tonight. You want to see us win. You want to know how you can take part in that and get where you feel like you're causing change so that here is the Department of Justice, not just OCD in New Mexico, not just the Environment Department, get the Department of Justice in here with the EPA to participate in this fine of the largest natural gas producer in New Mexico, and that is this company that Jim's referring to called Hilcorp. So there's the DOJ release. My wife, Jane, is a retired school teacher. I'm had a business in Farmington, New Mexico. I grew up in Farmington, and Jane and I sold what we had in Farmington and moved to buy a little ranch out here in Governador, New Mexico, the old community of Governador, and start a sustainable ranching program, which we did in 1999. There's me, my horse, but that is full disclosure, that's my neighbor's dog. But those are our cattle, that's our place. And that was our dream. So people have different kind of retirement dreams. Ours was to move out here and try to affect recovery, ecological, environmental recovery of the rangelands that had been so abused by federal grazing policies over the years, and of course for many years of oil and gas development and impact on the surface. And that's what Jane and I worked at first. And thank you, Tom. That's just the right picture so that, what we could see was obvious. So you didn't have to be a, environmental scientist to know that what you're looking at here is a bad thing. And if that is on the ranch that you bought, then it's just incumbent, I think, on you. Although Jane and I were so dedicated to this dream that we had, and we were having success at improving rangelands and getting to work with the National Conservation Service and the USDA and others, and learning the cattle business and being successful at that, including our families. Uh, and we didn't have 10 grandchildren then, but we have 10 grandchildren and 5 kids now. So there's just an above ground fiberglass tank to catch waste, and that's obviously uh, bad. And so what are you going to do about that? You see it. We all see it. I mean, here on the ranch, it's easier for us to see, but you drive down the highway, if you don't live in Albuquerque and you get out of town at all in southern New Mexico or in northwest New Mexico, you're going to see those things and think, or some other problem. You see a lot of air pollution. What do you do about it? How can you act? What can possibly what can you possibly make happen? So here we are, sustainable agricultural stuff. Tom, that's a great picture. If you have that run map of the map of the little with the colors on it, little run map. So right here, Jane, our ranch is right in the middle of that map. That's a hand-drawn map because ConocoPhillips didn't want to let you reproduce any of their maps. So I just drew their map. This is a map that their pumpers, the guys in the white trucks that go out and take care of the wells, this is what they use to identify where they go and what wells are their responsibility. When Jane and I got here and the size of our ranch, there were 77 wells on us in 1999. Each one of those little dots and little squiggles is a road and a well, natural gas well. So our home is and ranch is kind of overlays that area right there. I put the colors in myself for a different fight I was having. I was going to say we fought about the surface when we started. So we saw the condition of that tank. We saw the condition of the roads. We saw the condition of the rangeland being down. We started our fights then, and we kind of dusted it up. We got after it. Jane supported me. We were still trying to run cattle, but Tom's digging for something here where I chained myself. I actually was in a trailer and I chained the trailer to a barricade I made to stop the oil companies from coming in early when we had first gotten here because I found what they were doing was so egregious, hadn't repaired what they'd done. And so that headline there was Rancher Driller reaching a chord. And that was me reaching out to the press with a bag phone, having to climb up high, calling and actually getting KOB, who then called the oil company at that time. It's a different oil company. So I'm hoping that you're getting from me that I'm seeing things, Jane is supporting me, that we're reaching out, engaging the oil company, going after the press and regulators as well. So that, Tom, the next one we're looking for is a letter from the lieutenant governor. So it looks just like a business letter on state of New Mexico. Well, okay. Um,
You want to do this one?
that's fine. That's fine. Finally, there at the start, I just wanted to say your payoff. I wanted to put the payoff first so that the DOJ and the EPA and the New Mexico Environment Department are fining this company, Hilcorp, $9.4 million plus a bunch of conditions because of the because of an issue that I had gotten a hold of uh, later when we were here after Hilcorp bought ConocoPhillips. But I just wanted to show you the payoff at the first, since you kind of feel like we never win, we never get anything, and we never get thanked. So there's the governor. I'm Viva Rio Riva. That's my uh, email address and my Blue Sky handle, and so that's us. So what do you have to do to get the governor to thank you? And so that's what I'm describing. Our legacy of work, our foundation. And Tom, now we're looking for a kind of a glitzy folder that is a three-page like pamphlet, says Open Space Pilot Project on it.
Got it.
Uh,
Uh,
so that we
Coming
would,
at you in just a second.
okay, no problem. So that we would engage as deeply as we could with people we didn't like. Uh, and that's another big lesson that I hope that you take away. Not just, what I'm selling you to begin with is you can make a difference. You can fight for something. Uh, and when you see something that's wrong, that you could do something on your own. You have to be a leader, take responsibility yourself, not just as part of a big group. Once you take the step, like Gerta had said, Providence moves behind you, but you must take those steps and be committed. Then people follow you, and the many, many people that followed us. So, okay, uh, great. There's what one of the big long projects that we had to start with, dealing primarily with the surface. We created a partnership between ourselves, the BLM, the Holistic Range Management International, and ConocoPhillips. When I was saying, you have to reach out to people you don't necessarily like, the regulators are making me furious, or but I've got to go to the regulators. The oil companies are killing us, making us crazy. We can't get along with them. We have to realize the reality that they're there. Can we make a better result on the land? And that's what we did here. And the oil company embraced this. It wound up changing our model for how to do future drilling, change the entire BLM method of allocating wells here in the entire San Juan Basin as we were working on these surface issues. So Tom, the next thing we're looking for is a old-time picture of a guy with a great big flare behind him, and he's wearing a businessman's hat. So that growing up, getting close, very close.
I,
Looking for Carl Brashear in his businessman's hat. I went to school with his son. So that rule really close. Well, we can land on
there he
there.
is.
You got
There
it?
he was. So this is kind of exciting, guys, don't you think? I didn't want everybody to be, bored by me giving you a speech. So I think the picture explosion is kind of fun. So that growing up, for those of you that we're going to have to do some oil and gas work here, we got to understand the mechanics of oil and gas in order to understand the environmental threat and the importance of you taking action yourself, you finding a way to get a hold of an issue and drive it forward. So forever, and by forever I mean since 1924, in the San Juan Basin, when commercial gas was first discovered, they drilled a hole in the ground for natural gas, and the natural gas comes roaring back out. And that's the old movies you saw, Giant and with Rock Hudson and the Gushers, or There Will Be Blood and Daniel Day-Lewis and the blowouts. That was oil. Natural gas does the same thing. And when it comes out, it's got all kinds of impurities in it. Some come from underground. Also, some are introduced during the fracking process. So the gas is not available to be sold. It's too dirty, basically. In the old days, they just let that gas come up and they lit it on fire. Literally, and that's what it's called, a bluey line. And Mr. Bashir there, who I knew well, this is 1958, he's pretty proud of it. But if you can imagine, and I know Tom's an engineer and others that may be on here, Jim, imagine the amount of methane and the other chemicals, the volatile organic compounds that are coming out and being incinerated there, the waste of the natural resource, and then the just massive pollution. Pressures were higher in those days, so that thing might run for a week and light up the sky at night for miles and miles and miles. We're looking for some more photos like that. All right. So that was Mr. Bashir in 1958 when I was 10 years old here in the Farmington school system. This is probably 2006 on our ranch. It's the same thing. So that between 1958 and 2006, they're still blowing it out like that. And you can see this happened to be a very oil-heavy natural gas. So meaning they were getting oil out of the well at the same time. So you can see how cloudy and smoky it looks. That particular one was about, Jane, come over here and say hi. That particular well was about a mile down at the 4P Ranch. Hi, this is Jane Schreiber.
Hi, everyone.
Who's also mad, but mostly at me, but at methane. But that thing rained black snowflakes down on us, which was remarkable. So that, thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
So the main message is nothing had changed. That pollution is just tremendous. Um, Look for yeah. So right. That's another one that was being done like that. So there's nothing there. That's on purpose. That's a different well. That's not this one. That's from our ranch. And there you can see the derrick, and they have a bluey line over there, and they're burning the gas that's coming out of the ground until it's burned up all its impurities, and they can put it into the pipeline where they can sell it. So all the methane is being wasted. Why is that important? Because we get taxes and royalties both for the state and federal government, since all of the land that we're involved in has a federal mineral. We don't own the mineral. So you own the mineral. And Pat and Vicky and Kenneth Berg, you all own that mineral. So it's being wasted. It should be taxes to the state, royalties to the state and federal government being paid on that, being wasted. Tremendous. It sounds like a jet engine when you're near that operation right there. And then Tom, that we've seen him already, but as I saw that happening, I had been 1 foot in the ranching business and working on surface stuff, but um, in around 2012, um, the methane was being identified by an optical gas imaging camera or a FLIR camera. And Tom, if you wish, um, we could look for
I have
that.
that. That's the black and white one.
Yeah,
Let me share that.
yeah, we'll take that.
This one.
Right. So that I, I'll I will say that I became I was working on the surface issues. We were making a lot of headway, working with everybody that we were allies with, but I'm trying to impress on you, working with people that we were not allies with. We were working with the oil companies, with the regulators, with anyone, with the legislature, with both uh, in the Congress in Washington and traveling to Washington. I cashed in a life insurance policy so we would have the money to be able to go and do that, and finding friends wherever we could, and we found a lot, and we found them also in the places where we weren't expecting. So many helpful regulators, people working on staff, in the congressional offices, in the state offices, so many people when you thought that they were only loyal to the oil companies, only interested in getting more income for the state at the expense of everyone's health and culture and environment, that wasn't true. And it's still not true today, even in this climate. I wish you could find that picture I wanted to say about one of the allies. Tom, it's a letter from the lieutenant governor. It's just a regular business letter on state letterhead. If you do see that, let me know.
I will look.
Okay. It is,
I
if
don't.
there's any help, that's picture 11.
Yeah, they're not labeled that way.
It,
Is it? Yeah,
okay. Just keep looking for it.
yeah.
So I was transformed into the methane madman. And I think this picture captures it pretty well. Or transform myself, or I don't know, events I felt kind of got serious enough that I needed to make a further commitment. This picture is an optical gas image picture, a FLIR camera picture, so that as we kept reaching out to the press, kept working that side of it, we would lose at the regulators, we would win with a legislator, we would win with the oil company, we would run out of support in the nonprofit community and not getting help. We never quit, kept going back to try to increase our reach and our impact. This is a movie that Leonardo DiCaprio made called Ice on Fire. It was about methane. He narrates it and he produced it. And they found out about us, and they came here to the ranch many times for 4 minutes of film. But this is from the Ice on Fire movie that DiCaprio made about methane, and it's a little bit heartbreaking because it's old enough that they were still thinking lots of possibilities, and some of those things have not come true, but most of the regulations that Tom and Jim and other activists on here worked for have come true. We did not have those. So, uh, uh, there's a reason to be hopeful and forward looking, and a reason to feel an obligation because there's so many people that depend on us doing this work, not just your family, but others and others that you'll never meet and never know. So I'm encouraging your
Don,
activism.
I'm gonna scan forward and you just tell me if any,
Oh, you just passed it
that's the one you wanted? Okay. This one?
right there.
Okay, there we go.
So, you got to go to reach out and find people that can help you, and don't assume that people won't. Here's Ron Curry, and who was the Secretary of the Environment here in New Mexico back in 2008 at that same kind of time frame we were talking about. Uh, Joanna Prukop was the Secretary was MNERD, Secretary of Energy, and of course Diane Danish was the Lieutenant Governor at that time. Those people supported us. And I'm just going to say on here, I'm very honored to have the Lieutenant Governor's daughter in our audience tonight. So um, you let her know, Sarah, that how much we appreciate the work she did back then for all of us and continues to do. So hats off to Diane. Um, and Tom, if you want to, uh, you could give us the notice, if you can find one, or a green completion slide. It happens to be number 21. That's good, right there. So another thing, here we are, um, working with the state government, going on and pushing on to Washington, because I had, and you'll see in a minute if we can find the right slide. Once Hilcorp bought ConocoPhillips in 2017, the end of 2017, remember, we'd had those agreements with ConocoPhillips, partnerships, made progress, still arguing with them, but making progress, getting help from legislators, regulators, government officials. But when the change was made from ConocoPhillips to Hilcorp, um, we needed more help than we could get here. The challenge was so big. And Jim mentioned Hilcorp as a company, a little mom and pop that owns stripper wells. And part of that's true. They own the majority of the stripper wells in New Mexico. They are not mom and pop. They are the private company funded by the Carlyle Group, for those of you who are familiar with that private equity. And their owner is Jeff Hildebrand, and you can look any day on Forbes and see what he's worth. The last time I looked, it was 10.2 billion. They do it every day. Just look at Forbes and put in Jeff Hildebrand, and you'll uh, get his net worth that day. So 10.2, far from mom and pop, although they hide behind the myth of mom and pop, say we're just a little company, stripper wells, meaning low production. We can't afford to put on all the environmental controls and so forth. But that's patently false. And uh, he made it all the way to the New York Times, his company, his private company, Hilcorp, as the number one methane polluter in the United States. And most of that is because of their holdings here in New Mexico, but they're in Alaska, Louisiana, and other oil and gas producing states. So they are uh, uh, certified bad faith operator. And I went, while Jane took care of the ranch, by the way, I should have kept her in here for more thanks, because when you run a ranch and we're very remote, whenever you leave, somebody's doing all your work. So when I'm here at the EPA in Washington, D.C. or in Santa Fe, somebody's here doing all the work, and that was Jane, and we were running cattle at that time. So uh, got to have a good partner to get this all done. Here, I made several trips to Washington, fought my way up into the air quality task force and found somebody interested. I could not get anybody at that time. Susana Martinez was governor at this time. And, Ryan Flynn was the head of the Environment Department, an oil and gas guy. It was terrible. Ken McQueen was the head of the Energy and Minerals Department. He was a direct hire from the big Williams oil and gas company. It was just completely upside down. And I found an ally in at the head of the EPA in their air quality enforcement. And that eventually led to me giving them this presentation. Um, and they included these are Washington, D.C. attorneys for EPA, Robert Klepp and Chris Williams, now this is 2020. And uh, Region 6 is Dallas. That's the region that we're in. And then included in this interview was the New Mexico Environment Department and some names you would recognize right there. So that this is, they're not interviewing me. I'm giving them the information. I produced this show, and I'm sorry about the scrambling tonight. I could have done a much better job, but another person that you're reaching out to is to find someone that can do what you see right here. I'm just going to get behind my uh, camera here for a second. Let's see. Yeah. So that I don't see if you guys can see this, but we would produce really um, quality slides and exhibits that we could take. Some of you're seeing some of them now, to the folks that we were lobbying, folks that we were trying to get to help us, that we could show and make the point that we needed to make in a professional way. And we found someone to do that for us locally as well and help us. And that was very, very much worth it. And it adds to the power of your message. So that this is what you never want to see when you're a landowner. This is our first contact with Hilcorp. And I don't know if you all can read that. So I'm just going to read it for you.
There's some related ones let me show you what else I have here.
Okay.
There's Pick 25 that got a bunch of notes on it.
Yeah.
And let me just show you.
I need to,
that.
right. There we go. That's the
letter?
original of it, Pick 22. And then, 23, 24, 25 are all going to be what we want to talk about.
Okay.
So this one says, I love their phrasing, but they say they're giving us a courtesy notification of their intent to perform a well servicing job kind of on the land that we have as our grazing permit. So that in the so that we're extremely interested in that. Any time there's a notice, any kind of activity on our land, our great federal grazing land, then we take full engagement in that at every level. Never miss a meeting, get out in the field, go to the offices and get involved. And that's just a factor of making yourself an expert in what's going on, understanding, educating yourself, and then again, not being afraid to roll up your sleeves and get on the well site with the oil companies and their representatives, their contractors, their employees, and all the people that they use, because you're going to try to work something out. Is there a 23? Right. So this, again, I'm there talking to these oil company guys, just like I'm talking to you pretty intently. And Jane is there taking the notes, saying, here's who's at the meeting on this well site, the 127, that Steve was from the oil company, their production superintendent. Andy is from the drilling company that was going to come in and do the work. Juanita Farrell was their landman, the oil company's landman. Clayton was there also in production, and Travis was their construction guy. So that's who you usually have when you very first meet to discuss a project. And so these were this was what we would do with ConocoPhillips, and we drilled many, many wells here in cooperation with Conoco, and had our system worked out, that they would not bury the waste on the location as has always been done, that it would always be hauled off, that we would have what's called a green completion, uh, so that they would no longer use that bluey line, and you see that big fireball and all the waste and all the environmental stuff. They can actually capture that. There's uh, uh, equipment that allows you to capture it, and the other things that we wanted to talk about with them. They said, we won't do that anymore. We're not going to capture it. We're going to continue to blow it up in the air, or we're just going to vent it, which means we're not going to light it on fire. We're going to just let it go, which is worse, because at least it's combusted when it's vented, or when it's flared, or set on fire. If it's vented, it's the most potent form of global warming, that 80 times more potent than CO2 as it goes up. And now you think about that great big cloud that you saw that was on fire. Just imagine that wasn't on fire. It's still rocketing up to the atmosphere and blowing a hole in the ozone, and causing us to have tremendous global warming. So when they said they would not do that, we began looking for allies. And that's what these mad notes that I have here are. I'm just looking for people in Region 6, in New Mexico, in the OCD department you can see up there. I'm just scrambling to find someone to help us. There's another crazy page like this, maybe 25, Tom.
This one done?
Yeah, and so I've had my one slide, maybe it was a little early, but all that, I mean, I was cold calling people out of the EPA phone list, and for days, and I finally found this person who had the unlikely name of Apple Chapman, uh, but she was the head of the Air Quality Enforcement Bureau in Washington, D.C. And that's how I got to where I was giving them an interview, got to be friends with them, got them interested, and they got interested in what Hilcorp was doing. And that's in 2020. Um, that well that they were drilling, that they said they would not use the green completion. If you can find that, Tom, there's a well schematic, and there's also just kind of a black and white page that says green completions on it. It's
I'll find it.
slide 21 and 20. Whoop, there they are. Saw them. So that, again, we were working with ConocoPhillips and had agreed. The technology was theirs, sponsored by agreement with people like Exxon and the American Petroleum Institute. Thought green completions were a good idea to capture that gas, not let that big fireball go, or not let, even worse, the gas go to the atmosphere. So that's what we were really fighting on. And that's the payoff here. That's what the subject was. That's the fine that we eventually get to, so that we were going to EPA, the state as well, but to EPA primarily, and telling them Hilcorp is not doing what they should be doing, and there's federal regulations that prevent it. The state is very sort of, well, our hands are tied and we don't know. And I'm going to take a break here, our enforced lesson on oil and gas here, drilling, and just tell you that this is the actual well that we were talking about, but you're looking, that's the surface right there at the very top, and that's your drill stem, that's production stem that's going down in the ground. And then where the yellow things are, that's where they that's where they blow holes into the formation. They're doing the ones on the top were already done. They were going to do the ones on the bottom much deeper. That's about 7,000. I can't read it, but about 7,600 feet deep. When they blow those holes in, see the yellow part around the tube, that's sealed in. The gray part is concrete. There's a misconception that you stick some kind of straw down in the ground and get the oil or the gas out. And that's not true. It's more like a test tube. You can see that's all sealed off. The gray is the cement. The yellow is called the annulus. That's just the open space of the bore in the middle. Thank you for the little hand. I love it. And then they actually use plastic shaped explosives, and you can see the red lines there, and they blow holes through the steel casing and through the gray concrete into the formation. And then when you hear about fracking, that's the very first step. They blow those holes in there out into the formation. Then they put tremendous pressure on water and other chemicals from the top and force it out through those holes into fracture the rock. That's where the word comes from. Fracking is fracturing those formations as it goes out far, far back, and they pump that water down, or whatever fluid they're using to frack with. They even frack with diesel. But they push that down. The water flows out. Tom, make your little hand go out into the rock, right, like that. The water, for instance, if it's water, whatever it is, it's full of sand. They put the sand in it, and as the sand is forced back under tremendous pressure, and the water, when they withdraw the pressure, the sand props the fractures open and allows the gas or oil to come into the wellbore. So that's why you hear frac sand and what's all going on. There's a huge controversy in Bloomfield, New Mexico right now about making a sand mine for fracking up here. They're trucking it in from Minnesota. It's that's all part of the fracking process. So that when that gas comes in our case, this is our well, so that gas comes into the wellbore, it wants to come out to the top. And you saw what it does. It wants to come out under tremendous pressure and volume. So that what we succeeded in doing was getting the EPA to take charge. We could not get the state to do it. We had an adverse administration at the time, and we had no cooperation. The regional office of the EPA was not responsive, so that we fought it up to Washington, D.C. And we got an original notice of violation, and Jim Kinney was an EPA employee here in the state of New Mexico at that time, back when we were doing it in 2020. So that, yeah, that's great. So there's Jim thanking me. So we worked on it way back then. They kept working on it. We kept bugging them. I was, along with others here, I was on the methane advisory panel. I was on the governor's transition team for the oil conservation division. I kept getting on those meetings, kept driving to Santa Fe, kept leaving Jane here to do the work. Got to keep that up, have something that drives you forward. And for us, it's our belief that we need to leave this place intact for our kids and for our grandkids. And now for frontline communities, we feel our responsibility, and I hope that you do too, is that there's so many people that don't have the advantages that we have or that you have, that you're going to act for them as well. So that maybe you don't have 10 grandchildren, but you have New Mexico is full of people that need our help. Most of this oil and gas development are in communities who are underserved. We're here on the Navajo Reservation nearby, where we still have a third of the homes with no running water. Uh, we we need to advocate for them. Need something to drive yourself forward. To do that, you need to believe in yourself. Know that you can make a difference. Know that even though you keep getting beat and beat and beat, maybe 6 years later, you can get that oil company fined almost $10 million. And that's what happened. And that's why I'm talking to you tonight. And that's why I appreciate 350, Jim and Tom so much for giving me this platform. Is there anybody have a question or want to hear me talk more?
Don, that's amazing story. Your perseverance, your keeping going. I think just for myself, I'm not sure I would have been able to do that. Of course, I don't have an oil well in my backyard.
Right?
Uh, that might have lit my fire for sure. Um, we have some time. I would love to, if I certainly have questions, but does anybody, let's open it up. If if you can raise your, either put your question in the chat or go to the bottom of your screen. There's a little reactions button and you can raise your hand. It looks like this. And we can call on you. Well, let me get it started while people are thinking about their questions. And that is, um, you gave us a wonderful overview of your activities since 2020, maybe, or 2018, somewhere for a long time. Uh, I'm also interested in this, like you said, I call it the little mom and top pop gas producer. And the reason I say that is because for a long time, the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, when we proposed better regulations, they said, well, we're going to drive these little mom and pops out of business. And so take pity on the mom and pop. And when you say mom and pop to people, they have the vision of when they were growing up, there was a little corner grocery store, right? Which was literally a mom and pop. Mom and pop took turns at the cash register and selling you cupcakes after school. Um, so we know now that Hilcorp is nothing to do with that. They just Hilcorp just bought, I think, all the stripper wells in Texas from ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, these are multi-billion dollar deals. So where did they screw up? What was the straw that broke the back that finally pissed the regulators off enough where they had this fine that and is this fine sufficient? Has the fine changed their behavior? What can you tell us?
Well, $10 million fine is couch cushion money for oil companies, and Jeff Hildebrand's uh, no exception. But they hate it that they get fined. They fight it. They hate it because they fight it so hard. And the publicity that brings the DOJ down on them, uh, and the fact that it gives the opportunity for other people exactly like the folks that are gathered at this Zoom tonight to say maybe we could, stand up for the environment. Maybe we could actually fight an oil company. Maybe we could, fight our way through the resistance of the regulators, uh, get a politician inspired, get somebody to help us if we would lead. We embolden everyone when we get them fined, and that's the only thing that we can do at this time. If it were me, I would change fining into shutting in their wells. If you don't, you and I, everybody on this Zoom, including Jeff Hildebrand, the owner of Hilcorp, if his house is leaking, his gas is leaking in his house, the public utility comes and shuts his gas off at the meter and say, let us know when your leak is fixed and we'll turn it back on. So I don't know why that doesn't apply to industry in general. If you're not following these rules, if you're out of compliance, if you didn't do this or that, we just shut your well in, not fine you. That's what they don't want. So that's my, bigger drive. If I, not in my lifetime, but that's what I want to see happen is that we shut those wells in as a matter of enforcement as opposed to a monetary fine. But, monetary fine's what we've got, and we measure how well we do by how big the fine is, and a $9.4 million fine is a pretty darn big fine for anybody. And I think the ARC, regardless of what's going on in Washington or sorry, in the current administration, the ARC is with us. I mean, we are the ARC of justice. Is moving towards the environment. They're not going to shut solar down. Hey, everybody celebrate with me. We just had our first day of having our DIY solar system here actually supply solar to us through our inverter that we got up. And as kind of as sort of a rude gesture to the oil and gas company, I built my ground mount system for my solar out of used drill pipe and mounted my solar system on old oil field equipment. And so, that arc isn't going to quit. We're kind of taking a beating right now, getting our shins kicked, but that's no reason to quit, and that's no reason not to believe the arc of justice is gonna come around if we keep working, if we keep our spirits up, hanging, keep going, don't give up.
Questions? Just shout it out. We're all among friends here. Whatever's on your mind.
That's not unusual. Oil and gas stuff can be overwhelming, and we've got a question from Karen there. Anyway, it can be overwhelming, and you don't want to look like a fool when you say, well, which end of the gas pipe goes up? And I understand that very well. So you don't have to ask a question. It's all right. I'm just grateful that you came and you listened. Did you see that chat? I didn't see it.
The
Jim,
comment from Karen says, presumably they paid the fine, but did they change their practice? What's happening now on your property?
one of the amazing things, Karen, thank you very much. And I want to get to Steffi in a second. Hi, Steffi. Um, the the Department of the Environment has done something I've not seen before. Conditions of this were that they would have monitors go out from the state to observe Hilcorp when they wanted to drill a well and when they were supposed to capture this methane, not just report it and look at the the data afterwards. Have a monitor, third-party monitor go out. That's another big. That's a huge leap towards fixing these problems because the oil companies always have been able to be their own police and do their own self-reporting. It's always been that way. The state doesn't have the resources to do it. That's because the oil companies don't pay enough money because the state should have plenty of money to do it. Look at the fortunes that are created here. So That's huge, and that's a good question, Karen. What did Steffi say?
Have any of your wells been remediated and plugged by government programs?
No, um, Steffi, we happen to be, just by luck of the draw, we happen to be the entire township that we're in, hundreds and hundreds of wells. We're all from the original old El Paso Natural Gas, which was the original developer here in the San Juan Basin. And then they passed always to major companies. So El Paso to Meridian, Meridian to Burlington, Burlington to ConocoPhillips, ConocoPhillips now to Hilcorp. So we haven't had the horrible tragedy of having an oil company go bankrupt out from under you. But I am not at all sure that regardless of the amount of money they have, that's not Hilcorp's plan, just to delay and defray and wait until they can sell or because that's what Conoco did. They just dumped this old aging oil field onto Hilcorp, and Hilcorp was willing to come in, cut all kinds of corners that Conoco wouldn't cut. So, if Hilcorp does that again, we're rapidly going into trouble, and that is happening all over the San Juan Basin. They're not mom and pop. They're bad pop uh, operators that are ready to get what they can and get out, bankruptcy if necessary. So that's a legitimate concern, not for us, fortunately.
Rachel, I saw you, I think, waving at us. Do you have a question?
I wasn't typing, but I was typing. If you may have already seen the resolution that the state party approved for emergency methane um, enforcement, and if you might be available to consult with the Bernalillo Resolutions Committee about making that into an effective legislation, actual law.
Was that a question for me, Rachel, that I could help?
Yes,
Okay, well, what you want to
thank you.
do is it just my email is Viva Rio Reba at gmail.com. One word. And just send me
Thank
that
you.
information and I'll see if I can help you. Glad to.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Don, there was a question from Vicky, which I will read. How can we most effectively address abandoned wells and end those companies getting off the hook?
Well, Vicky, thank you. That's another project that we've worked on, and it was something that it kind of mirrors what happened here. Um, although the Biden administration actually came to the San Juan Citizens Alliance here and asked if they had an example of an abandoned well that IRA money could be used to fix. And so Citizens Alliance came to me and and I went to a oil company guy that I knew and met, trusted, who was into plugging wells. His business was plugging wells. And we formed a little group and went out and found a whole oil field I'm embarrassed that it'd been there since I was a kid, before I was a kid, very near to Farmington, just on the west side of the San Juan generating station. And we did the same thing. We're better at it. We had horsepower going for us. And in just 3 years, we went from nobody knowing anything about the Horseshoe Gallop field to getting Secretary Holland out here, getting the National BLM Well Manager Mike Warren out here, uh, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez here, uh, and we have now plugged 18 of those wells, and there's a big well plugging program going on there now. And we're talking about siting some permanent uh, plugging material out there and facilities, taking down abandoned facilities out there. And that's all happening. And that was citizen activism. And they did a great job, and the press played a huge part in that. You can look it up, Horseshoe Gallop. And Megan, that's how I met Megan Gleason, is got her to come out there and look at it. But we took a lot of reporters out there, people very interested in it. There's that arc again. See, Hilcorp doesn't want you to see it, or uh, uh, Missy Courier, from New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, wants you to think that arc doesn't exist, but it exists, and there's a big appetite for it. Look at how many people came out here tonight. It's amazing.
Thanks, Don. Nancy.
I don't, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to ask this question correctly, Don, but one of the things, just living in my little house in Albuquerque, not on this rangeland, but it just dawned on me that so some of our oil and gas is under land owned by the state, and some federal land, and some private land like yours, where long time ago, and I'm sure we don't need to go into that history now, the mineral rights were separated from the surface land, right?
Right.
So my question is, I guess I'm just beginning to appreciate the effort that private landowners have to make. You don't have any much say in what happens. Well, I mean, what tools do you have? Are there laws that apply to drilling on private land that you work through in all these examples that you gave us? Or, I mean, what resources do you have? I mean, does every single private landowner who doesn't want this destruction of their land, or what legal resources do they have? Do you have? Is that what you maneuvered? You can see I'm struggling to even ask the question.
Well, the reason you're struggling is because it's such a crazy situation. Trying to get your arms around the idea that you could own something but not have control over it. But to answer your question, I'll just tell you this little story. When Ted Turner bought the Pennzoil Ranch up in northwest New Mexico, that's northeast New Mexico, that's the Vermejo Park Ranch now. Pennzoil used to own it. And Pennzoil drilled some wells in there.
Right.
Well, Ted bought it and, was very much an environmentalist. Ted wanted to shut those wells down and not have any new wells drilled. And Ted Turner couldn't stop them. And that's the 1872 Mining Act. And what came out of that was that the mineral estate, meaning what's below our feet, is superior in every case to the surface estate, so that the mineral holder is going to be superior to you. And that's horribly unjust, and it's a giant injustice, because tribal land's the same thing. I mean, that might be their ancestral home, but if the minerals have been separated, then the oil company is going to march in there, and that's just the story of northern New Mexico. And drill wells and pump millions of gallons of water while people in those homes don't even have running water. And the pipelines surface pipelines for water are going by their home by millions of gallons, taken from their own land, because the mineral estate. And Jane and I looked at fighting that when we first got here, because of the injustice of it, but just made our decision that we would fight with what we thought we could win, what we thought we could do. We've never stopped an oil or gas well being drilled. We have changed how they've been drilled, where, when, and that's what we've dedicated ourselves to, and not tilted at that windmill. But it is a horrible injustice. Generations from now are going to say, what was that crazy split estate thing? It's nuts. How can that be true? But it is. I will say, you mentioned that they're under state land as well, and that's the shining star here in New Mexico. Stephanie, and as land commissioner, is taking the most aggressive stance, making the most difference, putting herself out front, and something to be really, really proud of, and really have. I'm on our oil and gas council, and I really owe her a great debt of gratitude. We all do.
Don, this maybe is a good point to interject the support that our land commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richards, needs on the legislation to allow her to increase the percentage of her depletion allowance that she's able to take from the oil and gas companies. Can you talk about that just for a second so people know? Bring this into the contemporary, into what's happening in Santa Fe tomorrow.
Did you ask me about that?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Tom Solomon's probably a better person to ask. I'm not in Santa Fe these days, kind of staying busy here at the ranch and some of the other things we're working on. But Stephanie's run this bill before, got beat by oil and gas, but we charge less royalty than Texas does. And it's a kind of a marquee issue, charge the oil companies more money. And they fight it tooth and nail, but it's I don't want to minimize what she's doing because over time it will have an effect. But any lease that's out there now that has its royalty rate established, that doesn't change. They still pay. We have leases that are paying 6% and 8%, however long that lease, and sometimes they're 30 years or more can be. So that's new wells that are drilled, new drilling that's coming on. So it wouldn't change. A little bit like the old EPA air standards, right? So that they were going to be, when they first started on methane, they were for new wells only. So that's not to detract from what Stephanie's doing. It's wonderful and it's important for the future. It will make a big difference. But rather to illustrate how the oil companies would fight against something tooth and nail, really, is the farthest thing in the world from putting them out of business. Gas is at the highest prices. Their profits are record. When they shatter a world profit record, Exxon does, it's usually their own. When they made the most money that's ever been made, they usually broke their own record for making money. So it's ridiculous that they don't pay their fair share, and they don't pay it on property taxes either. I'd really like to get the time to work on that, and I've done some work on it, but when they don't pay the property taxes, who pays them?
You and I.
I think
Don,
Don,
can I interrupt and try to answer the question by showing quickly our website where that bill is?
that'd be great. That'd be great,
Sure.
Tom.
So let me just do that. So if you, and I put the link to this in the chat, but 350 New Mexico has a website. And if you go to the link that I showed you or under New Mexico Climate Action, the top climate and energy bills 2025, and you'll find this page. And then down below here is the list of bills that we are kind of tracking and prioritized for this session. There are many and many more than this, but these are the ones that we've highlighted so far. The bill that you're talking about and Jim is talking about is actually up in committee tomorrow, and it is, let's find it. This is Bill 23, oil and gas royalty rate changes. It's being carried, interestingly, by Senator George Munoz this session. And tomorrow is January 28th at 9 o'clock. That bill is in the Senate Conservation Committee. So if people want to show up on Zoom or attend in person or contact the committee members, that's the time and place to do it in its first hearing. And it does exactly what Jim and Don were talking about, increase the royalty rates for the prime drilling regions in New Mexico, in the Permian Basin primarily, to basically just the same as what Texas pays, because oil drillers are getting a discount in New Mexico, and they shouldn't. And so if people want to know how to do that, just click on the hyperlink that says Senate Conservation Committee. It's their little abbreviation there. You'll see the committee schedule for tomorrow. And Senate Bill 23 is right there. It's the fourth bill. And if you liked information about how to participate, that's all right down there, right under the list of bills in the agenda. So that's a quickie little tutorial for how to participate. But yep, that bill is up tomorrow.
So Don, I was, drilling down a little bit, forgive the pun, on how this works because I agree. The industry, the minute you talk about regulation, they scream bloody murder, and the minute you talk about putting up their depletion allowance, even on nickel, they scream bloody murder. And even if you're talking about their depletion allowance increase that doesn't happen for 10 years, they still scream bloody murder. But it's, those fights are important, just like the ones you've been talking about, because we have this arc we're working on. And how are we going to know if we're making progress? If we can make some of these things stick, just like now, Hilcorp has to do a green completion. That's huge. It's not going to stop climate change in of itself, but it's an important marker in the progress of, and we need, these fights are really important for those reasons.
Well, I think you got a great group here, and thanks everybody for hanging in. I don't want to keep folks if any longer, other than to say, let me get my hat on here. I'll be the methane madman and tell you that you're all an inspiration to me and to Jane. We know you're out there, and the work that 350 does, and the fact that you all are motivated enough to come out and sit through this presentation and listen to us talk about what we're doing, and hopefully take those messages home, put them in your heart, and think about the others that you can advocate for. And you've got the email for me if you've got questions on oil and gas stuff. I'm always here to answer those things. Thank you very much, Jim and Tom.
Don, just before you run off, I know you probably haven't had dinner yet, but Steffi has a question, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go, Steffi.
Don, thank you so much for all your work and coming and talking to us. This was great, seeing all the details. I was just wondering if the new methane satellites have fine enough resolution to see leakages on your property and other San Juan property, and if that is something that has helped change Hilcorp's behavior, or at least aided in enforcement.
Yeah, the methane sat, all of those things, and when we talk about the arc, Steffi, so look at the advancements. When Jane and I got here up into 2012, all we could do is say we see the vapors, we see the distortion in the air, we smell it, we hear the leak. So what we call AVO, audio visual olfactory, we know it's there, and talking to regulators and maybe people like yourselves, they'd say, yeah, well, okay, I'm sorry, it smells bad. But when we got that FLIR camera up there, the optical gas image of exactly what was there, that just kind of like was earth shattering and changed things. So methane sat now, that's another change. So the arc is going that way. They can claw back and say they don't want to do it and pull funding and so forth. That's not going to change how we're moving through this world. We're going to keep going that way, and the work that EDF, and I should make a public compliment to them for all the support that they've given us, and many other organizations. But that's true for so many nonprofits. So we're not going to quit. You're not going to quit. We've got our kids to think about. We've got the future to think about. We know that this is what makes it happen right here. We can do it. Don't quit. Don't give up. Keep going.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks for the inspiration, Don. This has been wonderful. And I can't wait to buy you a beer sometime.
I can't wait either. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tom. Bye, everyone.